Mushi had a special friend named Maushan. Nobody knew where Mushi came from, but after being seen here and there, she'd always go back to Maushan. When Maushan's zoo enclosure was being renovated, Mushi seemed troubled and waited around until she could be reunited with her friend. Mushi is a small black cat. Maushan is a large, shaggy, old lady Asiatic bear. The two seemingly have little in common, but for over a decade, they have shared space, food, snuggles, and a special bond. Neither has ever acted aggressively towards the other. They just seem to have faith in one another. If you have your study guide, now's a good moment to pull it out. Faith is important. Friendships last when we have faith that the other person cares for us. Relationships thrive when we can argue in good faith, expecting the best from the other person, even in moments of intense emotion. Faith is important in life, and it is important in belief. In the Bible, the book of Hebrews has a lot to say about faith. Hebrews encourages readers to hold fast to their faith in Jesus and warns them about drifting away from him. In the opening chapters of Hebrews, the author introduces us to Jesus' role in the universe and in our salvation. And we are told that Jesus is superior to the angels, to earthly priests, and he is ruler of all. No other New Testament document quotes the Old Testament as many times as the book of Hebrews does. The author of Hebrews is not named, but we know that whoever wrote it is deeply versed in the stories of the Old Testament scriptures, and it shows. With this backdrop, we open up our Bibles to Hebrews chapter 11, a chapter that is sometimes labeled the faith chapter. It's in your study guide, or you can follow along on the screen. Why don't you join me on the odd-numbered verses? Ready? Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. Faith is important, not just in relationships, not just when it comes to religious beliefs. Even what we believe about the world and how it works requires faith. Some of you know that I have a degree in math that has been oh so useful. And when I was studying math, there are a lot of things in math and science that we kind of think of as being exactly right, that there's evidence that they're proven and that there's no question of them. Math and science, they are realms where evidence reigns supreme and you don't need faith because you have the facts. However, in mathematics, there are proofs and equations, and some of those run into volumes that you have one proof for one thing that takes up a shelf of a library. But those proofs are built on certain underlying assumptions called axioms. And there are several foundational axioms in math that have never been proven. If they are ever disproven, math and physics, science as we know it, comes crashing down. Now, these equations work mathematically, and they describe mathematically the way things function in our world and what we see. So, even though they haven't been proven, mathematicians accept these axioms, these underlying assumptions, as true. But if you're accepting something as true without evidence, or with some evidence, you're accepting it on faith. So even mathematicians accept underlying assumptions of their work on faith. Whether it is science or math or something else in your world that you are building your life on, it all breaks down at some point. No matter how smart you are, how much you've learned, how many experiments you've done, at some point you have to take something on faith. That faith could be in the scientific community. It could be in a person, a relationship, something you've observed, your own senses. But at some point, you are taking some of it on faith. You're trusting in something. And all of that can crumble pretty easily. Everyone needs faith. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. Join me on verse 3. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what we see is not made out of things that are visible. What we see is not made out of things that are visible. At some point, we have to go off of our senses and go on faith. As we go through Hebrews chapter 11, the author names people from Israel's history, reminding us how God has led in their past and how they were faithful. Verse 4, by faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. By faith Enoch was taken up so that he did not see death. By faith Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age. By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. All of these people whose stories we can read in the Old Testament, they operated by faith. And that's amazing. These people had so much faith, so much strength of belief in God. And you read that long list and you think, that's so cool and I could never do that. But for each story on that list, for each of those strengths listed, we have a different version of the story, a different side of the story. Abel is a bad brother. Enoch is the father of unfaithful children. Noah is a drunkard. Abraham an adulterer. Sarah a doubter. Jacob a trickster and a cheat. Moses is angry and doubting. Israel is whiny and ungrateful and keeps on messing up. And Rahab is a prostitute. Their stories are big and complicated. They are not perfect people. They are humans like you and I with flaws and shortcomings. Yet, Their stories are recorded and remembered. Not just their failings, not just their shortcomings, not just their faith and strengths. We have the whole range of their story. These messed up, struggling people full of shortcomings are chosen in Hebrews 11 as examples of faith, as examples of strength. And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised. Since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. As big as their faith was, as amazing and complicated and human as they were, as much faith as they had, they didn't see what God had planned, what God had promised. God didn't have one plan for us, for them, and another one for us. We're all operating on a level playing field. There isn't one way of being saved in the Old Testament and a different one in the New Testament. No, God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We keep reading. Therefore, after all of this, after all these people who are human to their core, who have struggles and strengths and faith and follies, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. They have shown us that faith is important. They had faith that God would do what he promised, that he would send the rescuer. They had faith in what they hoped would come. They had a lot going for them, but they didn't know Jesus. We have faith in what we know has come. We know Jesus. We can have shortcomings, struggles, doubts. They did. Yet they are remembered as pillars of strength and faith. They had shortcomings too. They also had perseverance. Hebrews talks about running the race. I haven't run a lot of races recently. But I've never liked running them. Because when it comes to my lungs and my muscles, I do not have perseverance. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. Please, can we stop now? But it is a point well taken. Hebrews, the author of Hebrews, perhaps Paul, but whoever writes Hebrews says, we are running the race. It's a long-distance race. It's not about the pain in your lungs. It's about getting to the finish line. They had shortcomings, and they also had perseverance. They didn't give up, and perseverance was their strength. I listened to an audiobook last year called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. It's a good book. You should add it to your audiobook list. Duckworth defines grit as working on something that you care passionately about over a long period of time. I'm going to say it again. Grit is working on something that you care passionately about over a long period of time. Achievement, in her view, is less about talent. We read that list of people in Hebrews 11 and we see talent, maybe. No, it's less about talent, and it is more about the willingness to commit and keep at it. So if you say, hey, Macy, I want you to run a race. No, thanks. I don't have the talent. Hey, Macy, I want you to do something, but you have to have commitment and keep at it. Well, what is it? Maybe I'm interested. I'm good at those two things. People who display exceptional grit share four psychological assets: interest, practice, purpose, and hope. These individuals are able to weather the storms and stay focused because they are deliberate and they see their setbacks, struggles, and sacrifices as benefiting others. Grit decisions are often a matter of identity. If we are fully on board with Jesus, we should have grit. Those four psychological assets, we have those baked in to our faith. We have interest in things of faith. We have practice. We have an active doing faith. We come to church, we read our Bibles, we volunteer, we help people. We have a practice as part of our faith. We have a purpose. Our purpose is sharing the good news or the gospel of Jesus Christ. I think I remember a few sermons about that recently. The good news of Jesus. And we have hope. We have hope in Jesus' soon return. We have hope in a better world, a world recreated as it should have been. Perseverance was the strength of our Old Testament pillars of faith. When we read their stories, instead of thinking, that's so cool, I could never do that, we can instead think, if they persevered through that, then I can persevere through this. If they persevered through that, I can persevere through this traffic jam, this toddler tantrum, this season of layoffs, this relational moment, this financial crisis. Doubts don't disqualify us. Shortcomings are not our shame. When we submit ourselves to Jesus, when we take on his name as our identity, perseverance, grit, faith come along with it. Hebrews chapter 12 says, read it with me. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. We are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, by those who have gone before us, by those who are seated next to us. God himself is with us in our faith. And Jesus is seated at his right hand. Let us enter the throne room of God today. Faith is important. Persevere. In Jesus, your shortcoming might just be your strength.